Hello, my name is Antonio Sabatini, and with me today is my identical twin cousin, Eric. Now last night, Eric asked if he could pick a story from the bag. Of course I said yes. I don't know why it took you so long to ask. Yes, okay, I understand. Sometimes Eric is shy. Well, he did pick out a story, and it's called The Stonecutter. And we're going to tell it to you today. Once upon a time, there lived a stonecutter who went to work every day to this great rock that was on the side of a big mountain to cut out slabs for gravestones or for houses. He understood very well which kinds of stones were needed for what kind of purposes, and he was a very careful worker, so he had plenty of customers. For a long time, he was quite happy and contented and asked for nothing more than what he had. Now in the mountain dwelt a spirit, which now and then appeared to men and helped them become rich and prosperous. The stonecutter, however, had never seen this spirit and only shook his head in an unbelieving air when anyone spoke of it. But a time was coming that he would change his opinion. One day, the stonecutter carried a gravestone to a house of a rich man and saw there all sorts of beautiful things which he had never even dreamed. Suddenly, his daily work became heavier and harder, and he said to himself, "Oh, if only I were a rich man. I could sleep in a bed with silken curtains and golden tassels. Oh, how happy I should be." And a voice answered him, "Your wish is heard. A rich man you shall be." At the sound of the voice, the stonecutter looked around but could see nobody. He thought it was all in his fancy, and he picked up his tools and went home, for he did not feel like working any more that day. But when he reached his little house where he lived, he stood in still amazement, for instead of his wooden hut was a stately palace filled with splendid furniture, and most splendid of all was the bed. In every respect like the one he had envied. He was nearly beside himself with joy, and a new life, the old one, was soon forgotten. It was now the beginning of summer, and each day the sun blazed more fiercely. One morning the heat was so great he could scarcely breathe, and he determined to stop at home until evening. He was a rather dull man, for he had never learned how to amuse himself, and was now just peeping through a tiny hole in the blinds, to see what was going on the street below, when a little carriage passed by, drawn by servants dressed in blue and silver, and in the carriage sat a prince, and over his head a golden umbrella was held to protect him from the sun rays. "Oh, if I were only a prince," said the stonecutter, as the carriage vanished around the corner. "Oh, if I were only a prince and could go in such a carriage and have a golden umbrella over me, I would be so happy." And a prince he was. Before his carriage rode one company of men, and behind it another. Servants dressed in scarlet and gold bore him along, and the coveted umbrella was held over his head, and everything his heart could desire was his. But yet it was not enough. He looked around at the grass and the rays of the sun scorching it, and in spite of the umbrella held over his head, each day his face grew browner and browner, and he cried in anger, "The sun is mightier than I! Oh, if I were only the sun!" And the mountain spirit answered, "Your wish is heard. The sun you shall be." And the sun he was, and he felt himself proud in his power. He shot beams above and below, on earth and in heaven. He burnt up the grass in the fields and scorched the faces of princes and the poor folk alike. But in short time, he began to grow tired of his might, for there seemed nothing left for him to do. Discontent once more filled his soul. And when a cloud covered his face and hid him from the earth, he cried in anger, "Does the cloud hold captive my rays, and is mightier than I? Oh, I wish I were a cloud, and mightier than any." And the mountain spirit answered him, "Your wish is heard. A cloud you shall And a cloud he was, and lay between the sun and the earth. He caught the sunbeams and held them, and in his joy the earth grew green and flowers blossomed. But that was not enough for him. For days and weeks he poured forth rain till the rivers overflowed their banks. The crops of rice stood in water. Towns and villages were destroyed by the power of the rain. Only the great rock of the mountainside remained unmoved. The cloud was amazed at the sight and cried in wonder, "Is the rock mightier than I? Oh, if I were the rock!" And the mountain spirit answered, "Your wish is heard, and a rock you shall be." And the rock he was. He gloried in his power. Proudly he stood, and neither the heat of the sun nor the force of the rain could move him. "This is better than all," he said to himself. But one day he heard a strange noise at his feet. And when he looked down to see what it could be, he saw a stonecutter driving tools into his surface. Even while he looked, a trembling feeling ran through him, and a great block broke off and fell upon the ground. Then he cried in his wrath, "Is a mere child of earth mightier than a rock? Oh, if only I were a man!" And the mountain spirit answered, "Your wish is heard. Once more, a man you shall be." And a man he was. And in the sweat of his brow, he toiled again at his trade, stone cutting. His bed was hard, and his food was scanty, but he had learned to be satisfied with it, and did not long to be something or somebody else. And as he never spoke for things he did not have or desired to be greater and mightier than other people, he was happy at last, and never again heard the voice of the mountain spirit. Thank you. God bless you, and good night.